there's about 105 images, but it should be done in an hour. It's a bit of a mixture. I've done talks before on Rowsley, on Hassop and Great Longstone, and on Monsal Dale, so there's some of these taken straight out of it. Anyway, we're starting at Matlock, or Matlock Bridge as it was till July 1905. The cursor is very light, so it might have to go backwards and forwards, because I've got to use that as well to point to things. That there is Matlock South signal box. There were 2 signal boxes until 1910, until the one on stilts was opened in the centre. The railway opened in 1849, June 1849, backed by the Midland and the London and North Western Railways. I won't go into the earlier things. It was short of money in 1852, and it leased its line to the 2 backers. And for that reason, because the LNW started building from the Stockport end, not much happened. One was trying to get to the north and the other one was trying to stop it. This is the last Manchester, Buxton, Matlock and Midland Junction Railway timetable. At that time, Matlock was Matlock Bridge, as I said, till 1905, and Darley wasn't named Darley Dale till 1890. What Stanwell is not on there, or what Stanwell Bridge initially, as that didn't open till 1853. So here we've got a couple of photos, earlyish photos of Matlock Station or Matlock Bridge. That is the South Junction, or the South, Matlock Bridge South signal box. So this is the problem. And this is the one taken off what is today Pete Rail's platform. And that is Smedley's bus there to take people up to the hydro. This is Matlock Station, the staff in 1916, in January 1916 to be precise. Most people actually worked in the goods department, so they weren't all on the station. This chap here is in charge of the horses in those days. Harry I. Hanson, the station master, came from Bakewell in 1911 and then went later to Burton-on-Trent. That's his son. He died quite young, his only son as well. There are a couple of hangers on here. One is the bloke in charge of the bookstall, but there looks a lot of people because they're all like the photos taken in those days, and they were generally taken at change of shift, so you got both shifts, staff for both shifts there. Shortly after this, they'd start employing females. The people that have got the armbands are people who are who could be called up to join the forces, and they were generally the people replaced by women. Here's the box on stilts, opened in 1910 and closed in 1969, the day before the line was singled to Ambergate. Here we have Constable Hart's Quarry, now so houses being built off it and on it, and a couple of the locomotives they had certainly being used into the 1960s. And this is the peak rail bridge over the river. This was the original bridge, a cast iron bridge, which was replaced in 1887. And they didn't stop the railway as they do today. They put a temporary signal box in and used single line working and kept the trains running. And now we move on to Darley Dale, which is opened as Darley. It's not a good plan, but the station was on the other side of the crossing. It was more or less where this engine is below. Although the name Darley Dale was used well before the change in 1890. In 1873, they built a much larger station on the other side of the crossing. It was sponsored, I think, well, I don't know it's sponsored, but urged to do it by Joseph Whitworth, who was then a director of the Midland. Quite strange to know that in 1874 he objected to selling his land to build what would have been extended sidings at Rowsley. And that is the plan which people have seen if they've been in the building at Darley. That's the plan for the new station. Here's a couple of photos, V.R. Morton's photos. The slow lines between Darley Dale and Church Lane Crossing were opened in 1901. And there was a branch just before Church Lane Crossing that went up to Stancliffe Quarry and actually beyond, zigzagged up the hillside. There was originally a Stancliffe siding at the other side of Church Lane Crossing. That was replaced by this line which went direct. The siding would be where the Church Inn car park is, and this is the line went off there, as you could see when they brought the wagons down. They came down engine first, and they could only get a couple of wagons into this little shunt bit there, and then they went forward into the sidings there. This is a letter saying don't use the sidings in 1939, so they've obviously been out of use for a little while before that. And then we go to Church Lane Crossing. Off the top of my head, the bridge, the footbridge, was put in 1910, 1911. As was the one at Darley Dale. They were all done at the same time. And this is the last day of VR operation. Dugwood was this penultimate signalman having his photo taken there, and that is the last train approaching Church Lane Crossing, which was a Saturday. The train should have run on a Sunday, but there was a guard's work to rule. In fact, the last train on the Saturday didn't run at all. And it was running about 20 minutes late and took about 20 minutes to go through the section to Peak Forest North. All the other signal boxes had been closed or were locked out. And then we run on to Rowsley. It's not particularly in line order, it's more in a order of historical order. The original line was to follow the Wye Valley, but the Duke of Rutland objected to it going through his land. So the railway proposed an alternative route through Chatsworth Park and to come back at Four Lanes End, which later was where Hassop Station was. The Four Lanes End is actually the roundabout there. And the vicar of Bakewell, who people had, on behalf of people who put money into it and wanted a railway at Bakewell, wrote to the Duke, and he sort of changed his mind, but still didn't want it through his land initially. So the alternative, having got a line through Chatsworth Park, and there was a good reason for this, because one of the Duke's relations was the chairman. I forget the name off the top of my head, and there were links with Chatsworth. There were, and they proposed a line via Baslow, Carver, Stony Middleton, and what 50 years later became the Hope Valley line, the Dore and Chinley, with a branch from near Chapel Henley Frith to Buxton, and another branch which would take the railway from this place called Shaw Knoll on the way to Beeley and into Bakewell, really along the A6 road. But surprise, surprise, the Duke of Rutland objected again. They proposed then an alternative branch from Baslow to Castle Hill at Bakewell, but in a way it was all academic because the railway actually ran out of money. It had spent a lot of money building the line. If you could think, between Ambergate and Rowsley, there's quite a few tunnels and bridges and things like that. So here we are. This was the terminus. The railway was going to go through Chatsworth Park at that time, but they didn't buy any land beyond it. And I say in 1852, it was leased to the two backing companies for 19 years. Just before that, Buxton, who had become chairman, tried to get all companies involved. The Midland would pay £200,000, and the Duke of Devonshire at that time was willing to pay 50,000 out of his own pocket. Now, that is in black and white in the Manchester, Buxton, Matlock and Midland Junctions railways, and is totally opposed to things you find on the internet, which says that the Duke of Devonshire didn't want it through his land at any price. These are tickets involved with an old station. That's a return from Rowsley to Matlock Bath. It's a Matlock Bath issue in 1861 before the station was closed. And here's a slightly earlier one, which doesn't indicate that it's at Rowsley. It's a 7-day excursion from Birmingham to Buxton, but the back says outside Greaves coach from Rose. Greaves was the proprietor of the Rutland Hotel at Bakewell. Anyway, here are a few more things. Very busy in a way. Photos taken in what became the goods yard in 1862 when they built the line from a new station, which we'll come to in a minute, built as far as Hassop to start off. The original engine shed, which is in the top photograph just before there was the railway went under the road now. It's all been flattened into the original station in the middle of the Peak Village site. And that was extended in 1878 to 4 roads. Still very congested. This was obviously taken on a Sunday because there's more than enough engines and there's wagons leading through into the old yard, as they called it. This was a year after, and that's the new station there on the left in both pictures. That was taken a year after the sidings opened. And the plans, which was Midland only, proposed for a new line from Rowsley to Buxton in 1859, and the Act was passed in May 1860. Now, for some time, I knew this was a photograph of the construction of the line, but I just couldn't put things together. But then all of a sudden I realised that's St Catherine's Church behind it. This is actually the viaduct over the river, and of course the embankment at both sides is yet to be built up. So that's a very early picture of around 1860 or just after. This is the new station. There was 3 stations opened at the same time. Rowsley, Bakewell and Hassop, all to the same contract, very similar in that all were built on curves. They had a main set of buildings and then something that was little more than just waiting facilities. The Bakewell has got the main building the opposite way around, but unfortunately, this is the only one that's gone. The original station says became goods only, and the line was extended to Buxton from Hassop on the 1st of June 1863, a fortnight before the London and North Western got into Buxton from the Stockport end. And one of the problems, as we can see here, was the gradients. The gradients from Rowsley were quite steep, 1 in 100, 1 in 90 was quite steep, as it was on the other side. They actually, as a result of this, decided to build sidings at Rowsley, which were opened in 1877, or opened fully. This little bit at the bottom, where it says 845 wagons, there was an extension in 1928. And you can see here the original engine shed, and you can see where the old yard was, the original terminus. There's a whole story to it, which I won't go into it, but from the Rowsley, and why they built the sidings is because of the banks. In those days, you either had to come with 2 engines from Derby, Towton, etc., or you split the loads and shunted and put them into separate trains at Rowsley. They were banked from Rowsley, not because the engines, even in those days, couldn't pull the loads, but because there were dips. And you can see here a dip between Haddon Tunnel and Bakewell, one again over Headston, Monsal Viaduct, and another one at Miller's Dale. And right to the end, a lot of trains were what they call loose coupled. The only brakes were the engine and the brake van, unless you put the brakes on, handbrakes on the wagons. And when you went down a dip, the couplings could extend, and therefore you could have a brake loose. And tests were based on how much, if an engine broke, if a coupling broke between the engine and the first wagon, how much a guard's brake would hold if it ran away down the line. So here we've got the sidings. For most of the part, the up sidings were quite ingenious, were below the goods lines in the middle and the down sidings, but they sort of went up at both ends, so you could actually shunt things, fly shunt them a lot rather than run up to the next wagons. This is the down sidings at the bottom during the last week before the sidings closed in 1964. And a new engine shed was opened in 1926. They bought land, the Midland Railway did, bought land from the late 1890s, somewhere Firth Derwent is now, which was a LMS sports area at one time, and where the shed is now, or the Peak Rail shed. If it hadn't been for the First World War, it would have opened earlier, but it didn't open eventually till 1926. There were problems with finishing off the coaling plant, and when it did open, it was after the general strike, and most staff were on 3-day a week. And Rowsley, of course, had royal visitors, lots of other dignitaries. From 1903, I think it is, to 1907, the King and Queen came on special trains from Rowsley, in most cases for the New Year ball at Chatsworth, I don't think that was right the first year. And then there were all sorts of decorations put up. You would have thought, actually, that Chatsworth would have provided the decorations, but it may surprise you to read in the High Peak News, if you could read that a bloke called Wild Goose at Matlock provided a lot of the floral things there. The trains always ran into the upside, and the King and Queen left through the booking office, through the waiting room there. Now, eventually, they did have a railway in Chatsworth Park, but not for very long. This started in the old yard, the goods yard at Rowsley, and it was all to do with putting in the pipe work from Derwent and Howden reservoirs. Lady Bow was built a lot later, and this was what they termed an aqueduct, which was going down to Leicester and Nottingham and Derby. And the contractor had 6 months to lay the rails, lay the pipes, and pick up the things and make it as though nothing had actually been there. And as far as I'm aware, that's what happened, because there were all sorts of rules on if he was late, he would there would be penalties. So now we start going up towards this is the plan how the railway should have gone through or past Haddon Hall. As most people will know, although there was quite a lengthy tunnel, most of it was covered way. The Duke of Rutland didn't want to see the railway from Haddon Hall. The fact that he lived in Belvoir Castle, he would have certainly had difficulties anyway. But on the 3rd of July 1861, part of what you can see there is a covered way collapsed and 5 people were killed. It gives you an insight into, because the census was taken slightly earlier, it gives you a bit of an insight to the people who work there. You hear about lots of things being using Irish navvies. There were some up in Monsal Head, but there were very few in here. They lived in what they call mud huts, really, but it was very well organised. They had a trusted person and his wife who looked after 6 or more men, 6 or more navvies. And unfortunately, one of these, the son of one of the sort of trusted people who'd followed the contractor, he was one of the sons was one of them killed, 16-year-old. If the another sort of year, he'd be elsewhere. So here's Haddon Tunnel. This is the south end of the tunnel, and this is the north end. When I was last up there, just over a year ago. This bit where the engine is coming out of the tunnel was a lake. They had a lay-by there, as you could see. Here's another picture. This is taken in 1946 of maintenance, doing a bit of maintenance work. No hard hats and yellow vests, of course, in those days. Here you've got an engine in the lay-by and another one on the wrong line, just coming out of the tunnel. And then we go to Bakewell. Bakewell again opened in 1862. These are official photographs taken in 1904 by the Midland Railway photographer. The station masters, they've gone from one end of the up platform to the other one. That's an interesting ticket to Miller's Dale because it's second class, and second class was the Midlands ceased to use second class travel internally on the 1st of January 1875. But that again is a story in itself. Here we have groups of staff. This is Harry I. Hanson, who was in the Matlock photo, because I say he came from Bakewell to Matlock in the middle of 1911, and he'd come to Bakewell from Grindleford originally. This is one of the photo of the station awards about 1960. Station Master Clark there having one of these best kept stations or best kept gardens, and of course you got everybody out for the photograph. Here's just photos taken in 1929 by the engineers department. I don't actually know why, but the engineers department took photographs in connection with developments or court cases or things like that, if people got killed and things. And the 30th of July 1929, I probably have to look through papers to see if there was a reason for it. Now, because there's lots of handbills around, or there were handbills around, lots of excursions, even up to so-called privatisation, which of course now if you run a special train, it's a news item. There is a bit about, that's the last Bakewell show when they had trains running, August 1966. Strangely enough, some years earlier, I started my proper interest in railways, or started train spotting, having been taken from Cromford to Bakewell show. I can't remember much about it, but in 1955, a couple of my cousins and their parents emigrated to Australia, and probably a couple of years before that, he came and dragged me down Cromford Meadows and Cromford Station, and introduced me to train spotting. And I didn't do anything particularly to start, but I can remember standing on getting the train back at Bakewell, and this express came through, and it wasn't a Jubilee, and I can remember the number now, 44938. There's a black 5, and that was the first number I took down. Now I've put these in, these handbills you get to all sorts of places, and it's only half an handbill because the details are missing. But it's interesting to know how Ramblers changed between October 1951 and August 53. in the earlier one, they're striding out. In the later one, it's somewhat different. That became the sort of standard image. Then we go up towards Hassop, Longstone, Monsal Dale, and Miller's Dale. So, and here we come to Hassop. Obviously, there's no trains coming the permanent way. People are standing on the platform. That station house is still there, and you can see at this side it was the main thing, which is now a cafe, is a substantial building, where here you just virtually had a wall and some shelter, and I think there was a gents' toilet behind it. And here's the plan for the railway, and fortunately they bought a lot of land. You had the centre of the line as planned, and here's the 4 lanes end near the station, and it was actually built right on the edge of the land they bought. Originally, as you can see here, it was going to cross on a level crossing on the road from Hassop to Bakewell, and it shows you at the bottom where it was going to be. So in a way they had to build a bridge over it, but it saved them a bit of money with the crossing. And that's the train service when it started off from Hassop. It was still worked by the engine from Rowsley, which came up. The trains always, you've got Derby times there, but the original line at Ambergate was facing towards Chesterfield, and any train that ran through to Derby had to reverse. It was only when the trains, when they opened the line through to Buxton, that they built the curve at Ambergate, which allowed you to run direct between Derby and Buxton. This is Hassop there. A couple of early tickets. Excursion from Masborough, Rotherham to Bakewell. Hassop is in bold, so that probably was the main destination in 1865. Covered carriage. There's a lot of history in the early days about people travelling in open wagons and stuff like that. And government class, which eventually became third class in 1873 to Manchester. Here's one of the other station masters, Frederick Bent, about 1900. This chap, as it said there was a big turnover in staff, but this bloke, James Bettany Nading, worked at Hassop for the whole of his career. Others moved on. During the First World War, the Army Medical Corps made preparations for a convalescent home at hospital at Chatsworth Hotel. That's at Enza, the club at Enza. I don't know if this is there, but a lot of these look rather underfed. They'd have special trains taking people there, wounded and other sorts of people. Here's another photo. This is the car park area now. They look like, although the Royal Medical Corps, they look like the proper people, not the ones who are ill and injured. And this is May 1934. This is a E.R. Morton photo. of an LMS compound. The LMS ticket from Hassop, quite rare actually, because they cut the service down, and there'd be very few people, or the very few need to actually reprint some of the tickets, because there wouldn't be many people use them. It lost a lot of its importance, Hassop did, when the Halt Valley line opened, and people from Baslow, etc., could get to Hassop, get to Grindleford, which was, especially if you're going to Sheffield, which was much cheaper. This is the last timetable in August 1942, and you can see here there's 3 trains stopping there. There weren't many that stopped at the other stations. So you couldn't say it was you can see why it wasn't well used. That is a photo taken, I think, shortly after the station had closed. The platform wasn't very good, and both canopies have been removed. And then there's a couple of people, a couple of porters there, mainly worked on the goods, but and that's a nice photo, looking towards Bakewell, waiting for the trip from Rowsley to arrive. This is the sort of engines that ran over the line. The Jubilees from 1938 for around 20 years. And then you had, for a short period, displaced Royal Scots and Britannias. The line opened to Buxton, I say, on the 1st of June 1863. That timetables were produced every month in those days, so that's the original timetable, and it had quite a good service, but there were many changes, and especially once you got to the winter months. I mean, some of these are actually connections. You see, a train wouldn't sit in Ambergate Station for 30 minutes. This is only put there because it fits. The Midland Railway, the LNW didn't want the Midland to connect with its line directly, have through traffic to Manchester, so it sought another route from Blackwell Mill towards New Mills, where it joined with the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway. They got on with that pretty well, even through Dove tunnels and where have you. The freight train started first. Passenger trains should have started in October 1866, and then a viaduct at Bugsworth slipped. Unfortunately, they bought sufficient land at the other side of the station, and then 3 months later, trains did start. But I'm not going to go into that part anyway. And between Hassop and Longstone, the area was famous for topiary. I think somebody could start doing that again. This is out of a journal which says that fashioned into the shapes of of animals and things like that. And the permanent way people did them, it's not J. Gilbert, it's Isaiah Gilbert. And you can see there was a lot of animals and birds and stuff like that. That's Isaiah Gilbert there. There's, I don't know who that is. That has got there Jim Hewitt. I don't know who the other person is. But he was based at Longstone. And it carried on till the railway closed. There are three of the Longstone people. There's Bill Clark, the station master, and you can see there's an animal there, but they've got a 7-foot topiary woman as well. They sorted out. But to say all this has gone, all been let to go, and you can do nothing about it. Now, we talked about trains splitting going up the bank. I think that more trains split going down because, again, with loose couple wagons, you could sort of split. You went a little bit, you still had the dips. And there's a number of cases where all of a sudden the driver realised there wasn't the whole train behind him, slowed down, and the bit at the back ran into him, and you can see what's happened here. So, and no doubt there would be people at Longstone have coal for the fires for quite a while, because it would be good to be good coal for locomotives. And then we go to Longstone. Opened as Longstone. For Ashford appeared on Station Times, not an official name. Had a signal box, as I got there, opened in October 75, replaced in 1903, closed again in 1913, and reopened in 1920, and finally closed 1931. There was no goods yard. Now, there's this building here. So this is certainly taken after 1903. And I've written here, it's commonly stated that George Marple was a director of the Midland Railway who lived in Thornbridge Hall and was responsible for installing the steps which gave direct access to the hall and what they call the adjacent waiting room. And it's said that this happened when the station opened in 1862. And as I put there, much of this is untrue. Marples was never a director of the Midland Railway, although possibly a major shareholder. He did not buy the hall until 1896, and the steps and waiting room date from 1903. So you see in the 1898 OS map, there's no steps there at all, or no building, and there's no steps either. And here's the steps. So this is one of these things which has been passed down. When you go into it properly, isn't all accurate. Station Master Coe was at the station from 1873 to 1906. He came from Monsal Dale. Unfortunately, in those days, you had to stand still. This is taken shortly before he retired, and he'd be about 60 then. And you can tell the photo is taken before 1908 because circles on signals from 1908 they were replaced by rectangles. This is him in his younger days with his family, which a lady kindly sent me. I've got a couple of other ones as well. Very well laid out. Important even at a station like that, a very important person. This is him again at other times. And in both cases there. And then the station was renamed Great Longstone for Ashford in 1913. I don't know how many stations have actually been renamed. Quite considerable. And here we are again. I'm not sure which station master this is, but all the sorts of things that were conveyed by rail and conveyed in guards' vans and stuff like that. This is a fitted train going northbound express goods in the early 50s. This was a Rowsley engine from 1935 to 59. We also saw it at it coming out of Haddon Tunnel, this one. It's I don't normally collect what you would term as hardware, but I do have that number plate off the front of that. I thought I ought to have one representative. And the bank engines would generally turn round the triangle at Blackwell Mill, and here they are running back, saving a path, running 3 of them back to Rowsley in 1956. This is John Hart. This is I think it was his grandson. He gave me that photograph there, or both photographs, some years ago now. You tend to lose. I met him at Mazzarella's at Rowsley, but you tend to lose touch with people. But he was very good with that. And the station closed in 1962, other than Alice Boardman, who was a signal. Who was a sister in the hospital at Buxton. She got special dispensation to travel on trains, and which lasted till 1967. And I can remember coming back from Buxton one day in 1966 when, with a late running train, or there was a late, the journey was late, and to make things worse, she got off the train. He stopped it at Longstone, but I got to where I was going anyway. Now we're on to Headstone Tunnel, where you come down from Monsal Head there. This is the building of Monsal Dale Viaduct. Some call it Headstone Viaduct. People are probably both right. That's in construction. There's several of them in 1862. That's looking up the valley from Monsal Head. You can see the railway there is hardly built up towards Monsal Dale station. And you get one or two things. In both these cases, the engines are superimposed on the viaduct. It was a bit of not fake news, but fake photographs. Here's a couple of trains coming out of Headstone Tunnel across the viaduct. 1050, you can more or less date that. I think it's sometime in 1924. It was one of the new LMS compounds, and looking at its condition, you can virtually say when it was actually photo was taken. That's one in Midland days. And here's one going south. with the signal again, the distance signal pre-1908. These are E.R. Morton photos with a banker going up and a local train coming down the bank. This is why when people say it shouldn't be Monsal Dale Viaduct, it should be Edston Viaduct, take your pick, because this is an official Midland photograph of doing some repairs. Part of it, not photograph, it's a plan, and that in fact is what it says it is. It says it's Monsal Dale Viaduct, but as we shall see later, there's other cases as well. And on to Monsal Dale Station. Originally opened as this siding as Crestbrook siding for mineral traffic. The passenger station opened in 1866, and the sidings then opened with the same name, was used with the same name. That is still there is a stone platform. This one was a wooden platform which came from Evesham. This picture of the station master, I must admit to getting that off the internet, off somebody's family history, but he certainly was a station master for 20 years. And that photo was a Midland official taken in 1911. There's one looking the other way, looking towards Crestbrook Tunnel. Lovely place for ramblers. There's the signal box. It was replaced in 1896, and the new signal box was closed in 1967. And I expect would have been a bit lonely in the winter, in the sort of winters they had there. This is just a picture that shows two Jubilees, again on expresses, one each direction. I've left that bit in there because when I did the talk on Monsal Dale and area, they were the people employed there. There was just one, apart from the station master, there was one porter and 3 signalmen, and they were the people. Monsal Dale closed to regular traffic in 1959. For a few years they had excursions. Here's one in August 1960, or a couple of trains really. The interesting thing is here, even till that time, until the beaching area, we've got excursionists coming from Castle Donington and Chellaston, which were stations that closed to regular traffic in 1930. It's, they still ran excursions. There was still money to be made for excursions. We're now going to what they call Watercombe Jolly, between Crestbrook and Lytton Tunnels. That's coming out of Crestbrook Tunnel. And there we are going into Lytton. Now, I don't expect you to read this, but when they built the tunnels, and they built the tunnels on the line from Ambergate to Rowsley, they didn't line them out. So some years later, they had to put bricks in the tunnels to stop stone dropping off. And all the way up the Dale there, they did this over quite a period. I've got 1882 to 1886. This is from a notice, and it tells you that they've got temporary signal boxes. And it says earlier boxes were opened at Crestbrook Tunnel, and what they referred to in the notice as a Monsal Dale tunnel, which was actually at Edston. So you've got this take your pick thing there. And I say they kept their traffic running with single line working, and it's the same when you got up to Cheetor and what have you. Now we go forward towards Millersdale and Buxton. Originally, the original station at Millersdale had 3 platforms, 2 through platforms, and a bay for Buxton. Before you got there, you got what was originally Oldham Line Company's siding, and the signal box was renamed Millersdale Line Company's siding. They did a lot of replacing signal boxes, having bigger ones if they wanted a larger frame. The replacement in 1905 would have been because they were building the second viaduct at Millersdale. So here's Millersdale Viaduct, the original one, the one that's actually closed, or it may not be now, but it was closed, the one they didn't do up. That's closed that was taken again 1862. Is people standing on it, getting towards its completion. And that is taken a few years later with a train leaving the station. Lots of photographs of the viaducts. This is a plan showing the original station and then superimposing the new lines, and what would be the new viaduct. You can see there it went through the original goods shed. The station master's house was on the platform. They built a new one on the slope above the station. That's dated 1902. And that they are staff at the original station. Again, 2 early tickets, one from Millersdale to Manchester, about the same time as the one from Hassop, and a Millersdale to Hassop in 1867. In those days, they had different colours for different lines, different directions. A lot of the people who collected the tickets were semi-illiterate, but they could tell if somebody got off a train at Hassop with a pink ticket, they were travelling on the wrong train. So here's one of several photos of constructing the new viaduct. And there's the line works in the background. And that's a photo. I think I've got a copy of that, a very large one, which came out of the yardmaster's office at Rowsley, which I actually bought for the standard 10 shilling on the standard 10 shilling firewood form when everything closed. So there's the new station master's house, look up there. And there's another one. This is off a postcard, probably about 1910. A bit scratched this, but that's a photograph of the station staff. I don't know actually when it was taken. I bought this many years ago from one of these antique centres at Healy. it was in a frame at Healy, Sheffield, and which was shown as station staff at Healy. And I knew it wasn't because it didn't have 5 platforms, and not many stations had a subway to numbers 2, 3, 4 and 5. And that was, when I looked at it closer, you found it was Monsal Dale, Miller's Dale. This is the E.R. Morton Classic, engine on the Buxton, for the Buxton branch there, express going through it. Everything it was as it was going to be for years and years to come. And then just north there, you had East Buxton Line Company's sidings. The signal box closed in 1933. This is an E.R. Morton photo taken less than a month before the place closed. And then in between the Cheetah Tunnel number 1 and number 2, again E.R. Morton, Nyasaland. And then you went on up here to Russia Cutting. There was a crash in the tunnel, which seems to people not know too much about. I don't know if anything's been found recently, but there were rumours about it, but not there. So we branch off to Manchester, which we're not doing, and then we're going towards Buxton, which is not far away. So here we are. They were Blackwell Mill originally referred to, but this became Miller's Dale Junction because it was the Miller's Dale end. So we've got I think it's a cattle trucks at the front there, and a Jubilee. This is the top end of the triangle at Peak Forest Junction. And before you got to Buxton Junction, you had Blackwell Mill Halt, which was for the for people who worked in the signal box, mainly in the signal boxes. These are the people in the 1911 census, what they did. Again, things have changed. I think some of these are now second homes. These were the places, I wouldn't say not to live, but they were, it was pretty remote in those days. This chap, George Alfred Drabble, came from Rowsley Station box in 1910, and he died in 1937. And here's from a relation, and unfortunately has died a couple of years ago, Ernie Drabble. That's the receipt from why he was actually taken in his coffin up to Blackwell Mill, and a train to Rowsley stopped specially. And there's Whiteheads at Rowsley charging £1.15 to take him from the station to St Catherine's Church, and that's his wife there, who, like today, although it might not be open now, provided refreshments in those days. And then I say we go to Buxton Junction. Then there was Topley Pike, originally called Newton and Chambers siding signal box. This was an LNW Super D on a coal train. They weren't liked by the ex-Midland men at Rowsley. You had to fire them different. differently. But it's an impressive sight, that is. And then the bridges along Ashwood Dale were replaced in the 1930s, all of them. They were, I think, originally cast iron, and there was a scheme to replace them all. And here's a Midland view going up Ashwood Dale. Probably won't be able to take that now because there'll be far more leaves and trees and that about. And then we go into Buxton, and the X there was just to point out a location of something else. But the two stations were built side by side. Ridiculous in a way that you couldn't have had a central station for the two companies. The Midland engine shed was there, closed in 1935. There was a link, or put in later, and that was actually in 1908, because a few things happened then. That's at the Midland engine shed. That's in the Midland station with a double header. And then one of the things, having been competitors for many, many years, the Midland built the cut-off from New Mill South to Eton Mersey through Cheadleath and that, and for competition between the two companies. About 1907, they realised that this competition was a bit daft, and they agreed to cut out waste and duplication. And one of the first stations to come under this sort of system was Buxton, or it was taken over by the Midland station master Pitts, who had come from Rowsley. And he also took over, the L&W man was transferred to Wilmslow, and he also took over Higher Buxton. So, and in those days, from that time forward, you could travel from St Pancras to Manchester Central and go back from London Road to Euston and vice versa. A complete change around. This photo's taken about 1910, and it doesn't include all the staff by any means, but it does seem to include wives as well. Again, it's like taking photos today. You wang them off and nobody puts who people are. But I say Buxton was one of the first to do that. And here we are with a joint football team, LNW coaches behind. And you can see here, 28th of April, 1909. I presume that's when it was repaired and that, but it says Buxton joint. I haven't a clue who any of them are, but it's a significant time of the time. And here we are in the Second World War. The LNW station there, the Midland one on the right. Here we've got soldiers being billeted at Buxton, and here's other ones at the Midland station at what was known as the excursion platform. They tended to run excursions into it and then put the stock elsewhere. And a couple of tickets from that period, ticket from Matlock to Buxton, first class naval or military ticket, don't know who it was or anything, and a government rate ticket from Chatham in exchange for a warrant. That could well be somebody who's injured and going to convalesce or something like that. And this is the last one. This is what we've lost, actually. These are 2 Midland Railway postcards. On the left, you've got the sort of the big tourist things, and then advertising circular tours. And if only we could do that today. Most of that is open, but the key bit isn't. Right, and that's it. I can't. Can you? Can you hear me now then, or? Oh, can you? Right. There's one thing about this: you don't have the same sort of abuse during the talk you do if you have a little bit with it.